Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you believed in, every goal, every value, every rule you lived by, was built on nothing. Not a lie exactly, but a kind of illusion. The illusion that life has meaning simply because we were taught it does. That morality exists because someone said it should. That success, happiness, love, even pain, all of it matters because we've agreed it matters. Now what if someone told you that none of it actually has to matter? That underneath all the layers of belief, tradition, and emotion, there's just nothing. That's nihilism. The dark, unsettling philosophy that doesn't just ask, what is the meaning of life? But dares to answer, there might not be one. And in this video, we're going to dive headfirst into that terrifying possibility, not to scare you, but to free you. Because sometimes, the only way to find truth is to burn down everything false. Nihilism isn't just a philosophical idea, it's a psychological earthquake. It shakes the very foundations of how we understand the world. And it's not just about denying God or religion, although that's where it often starts. It's about questioning everything: morality, purpose, achievement, even identity. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of nihilism's most infamous voices, didn't just say God is dead for shock value. He meant that the old values, the structures that held meaning in place for centuries, were collapsing under the weight of modern reason, science, and individualism. And if God is dead, what replaces him? If there are no absolute truths, no cosmic justice, no grand narrative, what's left? That's where the darkness creeps in. Because nihilism isn't a gentle philosophy. It's a void. A confrontation with the possibility that life might be absurd, indifferent, and utterly without meaning unless we create that meaning ourselves.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But here's the twist that most people miss. Nihilism isn't just despair. It's potential. It's a clean slate. It's the terrifying freedom of standing in front of a blank canvas, realizing that no one is going to paint your life for you. Not God, not society, not your parents, not your past. Just you. And that kind of freedom can feel like drowning. Because if nothing matters by default, then everything you do becomes a choice. You don't get to hide behind "I had to," or "that's just how life works." You're responsible. And that responsibility is both a burden and a gift. It's the burden of having no excuses and the gift of infinite possibilities. But how do we live in that space? How do we find motivation, hope, or joy when even those emotions feel like constructs? That's where many people fall into what existentialists call bad faith, living as if the old beliefs still apply, while secretly knowing they don't. So let's go deeper. Ask yourself, if nothing had inherent meaning, what would you still choose to care about? What would you still fight for? That question is the doorway out of passive nihilism, the despairing kind, and into active nihilism, the kind Nietzsche hinted at when he spoke of the Übermensch, the overman who creates values rather than inherits them. It's not about being cold or cynical, it's about being honest, stripping away what doesn't hold up under scrutiny, and daring to build something real in its place. Imagine if all the pressure to succeed, to be good, to prove yourself was lifted, not because you're perfect, but because those standards were never real to begin with. What would you do then? Who would you become? Nihilism forces us to confront the raw truth. That meaning isn't found, it's forged, and that means we're the blacksmiths of our own existence, hammering out purpose on the anvil of uncertainty. But here's the paradox. The more you accept that life has no inherent meaning, the more meaningful your choices become, because they're not predetermined. They're not fated. They're yours. If love means nothing by default, then choosing to love anyway becomes an act of rebellion against the void. If morality has no cosmic enforcement, then choosing to be kind, to be just, to be courageous, that's radical. That's where nihilism flips from despair to empowerment. It doesn't hand you a map. It hands you a blank sheet and says, draw your own world. And maybe that's the most honest way to live. Not by believing in illusions, but by choosing your own truths, fully aware of their fragility, and still living as if they matter. Because if you can stare into the abyss and keep walking, not out of hope, but out of will, that's not weakness. That's strength. That's meaning born in the fire of meaninglessness. How nihilism can free you to build your own meaning. If nihilism is the abyss, then the question we all eventually face is this: do we fall into it, or do we build something over it? That's where most people misunderstand nihilism. They think it ends in hopelessness. But that's just the beginning. The real power of nihilism is not in its destruction, but in the space it creates. When everything is stripped away, expectations, dogma, inherited beliefs, what remains is the raw material of freedom. And freedom is terrifying, because when there's no script to follow, you realize you've been improvising this whole time. But that's also the moment you become truly awake. You're no longer living someone else's version of a meaningful life. You're forced to define your own. And that's not just philosophy, that's fire. Because once you stop pretending that meaning is handed to you, you gain the authority to make your life mean whatever you decide it should. Let's get brutally honest. How many of us are living lives we didn't choose? Careers chosen for us by societal pressure, beliefs inherited without question, dreams borrowed from movies and Instagram. And we wonder why we feel so disconnected, so lost, so anxious. Nihilism doesn't cause that crisis, it just reveals it. It removes the mask. It says you're not lost because life has no meaning. You're lost because you've never dared to create your own. That realization is painful, yes, but it's also liberating. Because the moment you take responsibility for your own meaning, you stop waiting for life to deliver purpose to your doorstep like Amazon Prime. You start building it with your choices, with your actions, with your actions. And no, it's not easy. But when has anything worth living forever been easy? Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That's not just poetic, it's practical. When you create your own why, you become resilient in a way that no external belief system can give you. Because your meaning isn't borrowed, it's earned. And that's the secret most people never discover. Meaning is not something fragile that breaks in the face of chaos. It's something forged through chaos, through effort, through conscious attention, through the brutal honesty of asking yourself, what would I still do if I knew it didn't matter to anyone else but me? That's your compass. That's where you begin. Not with the approval of others, not with the illusion of certainty, but with the unshakable choice to care, even when the universe doesn't. And let's be real, the universe doesn't care. That's not nihilism, that's astrophysics. The stars don't weep when you fail. The cosmos won't mourn your regrets. But maybe that's not a curse. Maybe that's a canvas. Because if the universe is indifferent, then every act of meaning we create becomes a defiant miracle. Choosing to love, to create, to forgive, to dream. These are not signs of delusion. They're signs of courage. The courage to place value in a world that doesn't promise it. The courage to say, I know this might not matter in the grand scheme of things, but it matters to me. That is the heart of active nihilism. Not surrendering to the void, but dancing in it. Not because you're blind to the darkness, but because you've learned to shine your own light. And maybe, just maybe, that light is enough. Choosing meaning in a world that offers no. When you finally accept that the world offers no built-in meaning, that there's no cosmic scoreboard, no divine narrator guiding your choices, you reach a crossroads. Some people collapse there. They retreat, numb out, distract themselves with shallow pleasures, endless scrolling, or quiet resignation. But others rise. Not because they found a secret answer, but because they realize something deeper. If the universe offers no meaning, then everything you do becomes sacred, not because it matters to the stars, but because it matters to you. That shift is everything. It means every act of kindness, every risk you take, every dream you chase. It's no longer about fulfilling a script. It's about becoming the author. You're not here to follow a path. You're here to blaze one. That's what it means to become the flame. This is where nihilism stops being a philosophy and starts being a lifestyle. A way of living on your own terms, with eyes wide open. It's not about being cold or detached. It's about being intensely present. When you're no longer shackled to an invisible scorecard, you become free to pour yourself fully into what you love. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because loving is the point. You help someone not because karma demands it, but because compassion is your chosen value. You create not because the world needs your art, but because you need to create. And paradoxically, this kind of self-created meaning is often more beautiful, more powerful, and more resilient than anything handed down from on high. Because it's yours. It's forged in fire. And that fire never flickers unless you let it. So ask yourself, if no one could judge you, if there were no heaven, no hell, no social media, no applause, what would you still do with your time? That question isn't just philosophical, it's practical. It's a compass pointing straight toward the life that's real, not the one you've been pretending to live. It forces you to confront your values, not the ones you inherited, but the ones you choose. And here's the magic. Once you choose them, you become something rare, someone who lives with integrity, not out of fear or reward, but out of alignment. And in a world full of noise, that kind of alignment is unmistakable. It's the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need meaning to be handed down from the sky because they carry it in their own chest. In the end, nihilism is not a dead end. It's a clearing, a space where the old illusions burn away, and something real can finally be built. Not a life of blind optimism, but of radical clarity. Not a life of rules, but of responsibility. Because when nothing is guaranteed to matter, everything you do becomes a choice that defines you. That's where the flame is born, not in the absence of meaning, but in the act of choosing anyway. So maybe that's the final lesson. You don't need the universe to care. You need you to care. Because in a meaningless world, the most powerful thing you can do is mean something anyway. Not because you were told to, but because you decided to. And that is everything.